The Battle of the Denmark Strait was a naval engagement in the Second World War, which took place on May 24, 1941 between ships of the Royal Navy and the Kriegsmarine. The British battleship HMS Prince of Wales and the battlecruiser HMS had fought the German battleship Bismarck and the heavy cruiser Prince Eugene, which were attempting to break out into the North Atlantic to attack Allied merchant shipping, Operation Rheinübung. Less than 10 minutes after the British opened fire, a shell from Bismarck struck Hood near her aft ammunition magazines. Soon afterwards, Hood exploded and sank within 3 minutes, with the loss of all but 3 of her crew. Prince of Wales continued to exchange fire with Bismarck but suffered serious malfunctions in her main armament. The British battleship had only been completed in late March 1941, and used new quadruple gun turrets that were unreliable. Prince of Wales soon broke off the engagement. The battle was a tactical victory for the Germans, but its impact was short-lived. The damage done to Bismarck's forward fuel tanks forced the abandonment of the breakout and an attempt to escape to dry dock facilities in occupied France, producing an operational victory for the British. Incensed by the loss of Hood, a large British force pursued Bismarck, resulting in her loss 3 days later. The battle. Hood opened fire at 5:52 at a distance of approximately 26,500 yards, 24,200 meters. Holland had ordered firing to begin on the leading ship, Prince Eugene, believing from her position that she was Bismarck. Holland soon amended his order and directed both ships to engage the rear ship, Bismarck. Prince of Wales had already identified and engaged Bismarck, whereas Hood is believed to have continued to fire at Prince Eugene for some time. Holland was a gunnery expert. He was well aware of the danger posed by Hood's thin deck armor, which offered weak protection against vertical plunging fire. Holland therefore wanted to reduce the range as quickly as possible, because at a shorter range the trajectory of Bismarck's shells would be flatter, and the shells would therefore be more likely to hit the armor belt protecting the sides of the ship or glance off the top deck, rather than penetrate vertically through the deck armor. Holland closed the range at an angle that placed the German ships too far forward of the beam, which meant that only 10 of the 18 British heavy guns could train and presented the Germans with a bigger target than necessary. One of Prince of Wales' forward guns became unserviceable after the first salvo, leaving only 9 still firing. Suffolk and Norfolk tried to engage Bismarck during the action, but both were out of range and had an insufficient speed advantage over Bismarck to rapidly close the range. The Germans also had the weather gauge, meaning that the British ships were steaming into the wind, with spray drenching the lenses of Prince of Wales. A turret's 42 feet, 13 meters, bar and Stroud coincidence rangefinder in both British ships B turret 30 feet, 9.1 meters, rangefinders. The shorter based, 15 feet, 4.6 meters, ones in the director towers had to be used instead. Holland had Prince of Wales stay close to Hood, conforming to Hood's movements instead of varying course and speed, which made it easier for the Germans to find the range to both British ships. It would have aided Holland's gunners if they had both fired upon Bismarck as originally planned, since they could time precisely each other's salvos to avoid mistaking one ship's fire for the other. The British could also use concentration fire, where both ships' main armament salvos would be controlled by one ship's fire control computer, probably Prince of Wales' modern Admiralty fire control table. Prince of Wales struck her target first. She would ultimately hit Bismarck 3 times. One shell struck the commander's boat and put the seaplane catapult amidships out of action, the latter damage not being discovered until much later, during an attempt to fly off the ship's war diary on the eve of her final battle. The second shell passed through the bow from one side to the other without exploding. The third struck the hull underwater and burst inside the ship, flooding a generator room and damaging the bulkhead to an adjoining boiler room, partially flooding it. The last 2 hits caused damage to Bismarck's machinery and medium flooding. 18. The hit also severed a steam line and wounded 5 of Bismarck's crew by scalding. The damage to the bow cut access to 1,000 long tons, 1,000 t, of fuel oil in the forward fuel tanks, caused Bismarck to leave an oil slick and reduced her speed by 2 knots, 2.3 miles per hour, 3.7 kilometers per hour. Bismarck was soon listing 9 degrees to port and lost 2 meters, 6.6 feet, of freeboard at her bow. The Germans held their fire until 5:55, when both German ships fired on Hood. Lütjens did not immediately give the order to begin firing. Bismarck's first gunnery officer, Korvettenkapitän Adalbert Schneider, asked Frage Führerlöbnis permission to open fire? Several times without receiving a response, until the captain of Bismarck, Kapitän zur See Ernst Lindemann, impatiently responded, Ich lasse mir doch nicht mein Schiff unter dem Arsch wegschießen. Führerlöbnis. I'm not letting my ship get shot out from under my arse. Open fire. A shell hit Hood's boat deck, starting a sizable fire in the ready-use 4-in, 100mm, ammunition store, but this fire did not spread to other areas of the ship or cause the later explosion. It is possible that Hood was struck again at the base of her bridge and in her foretop radar director. There has been contention over which German vessel struck Hood. Prince Eugene, Kapitän zur See Helmut Brinkmann, was firing at Prince of Wales, following an order from the fleet commander. The gunnery officer of Prince Eugene, Paul Schmallenbach, is quoted as saying that Prince Eugene's target was Hood. At 6 o'clock, Holland ordered his force to turn once again to port to ensure that the aft main guns on both Hood and Prince of Wales could bear on the German ships. In terms of the force balance, this would nominally give Holland's force the advantage of 18 large caliber, 14/15 of an inch, guns, 10 in Prince of Wales, 8 in Hood, to 8 to 15 inches in Bismarck. During the turn, a salvo from Bismarck, fired from about 9 miles, was seen by men aboard Prince of Wales to straddle Hood abreast her mainmast. This straddle meant that some of the salvos fell to port, some to starboard, of the hull, and some precisely aligned over the center of the main deck of Hood. It is likely that 138 centimeters, 15 in, shell struck somewhere between Hood's mainmast and X-turret aft of the mast. A huge pillar of flame that shot upward like a giant blowtorch, in the vicinity of the mainmast. This was followed by an explosion that destroyed a large portion of the ship from amidships clear to the rear of Y turret, blowing both after turrets into the sea. The ship broke in two and the stern fell away and sank. Ted Briggs, one of the survivors, claimed Hood heeled to 30 degrees, at which point we knew she just wasn't coming back. The bow rose clear of the water, pointed upward, pivoted about and sank shortly after the stern. A turret fired a salvo while in this upright position, possibly from the doomed gun crew, just before the bow section sank. Splinters rained down on Prince of Wales. 5 miles, 0.43 nautical miles, 0.80 kilometers, away. Hood sank in about 3 minutes with 1,415 members of the crew. Only Ted Briggs, Bob Tilburn and Bill Dundas survived to be rescued 2 hours later by the destroyer HMS Electra.